Okay, I think we're gonna take a few moments off. I know what you're thinking, right? You're thinking, how can we take a few moments off if we never took any on? I saw that look on your face. Let's talk about Rosh Chodesh, because today is Rosh Chodesh. For those of you that were in shul this morning, which I'm sure is all of you. I don't know, that was like actually, if you would have seen what I saw, you would have seen the punchline, actually. So, there was just like a complete non-comprehension. It was great. If I could just achieve that consistently, then I'd really be getting somewhere, I think. But, Rosh Chodesh, of course, is davening-wise, it's a complicated business because there's all different kinds of things that get added in. Everything's a little bit different. So, first of all, when you start praying the Amidah, the regular Amidah, so you need to add in a special prayer called Ya'aleh V'Yavo, which is added in just before you say Ritzei, just before you get to Moedim. And that's a prayer that's to do with Rosh Chodesh. The problem is like this: if you forget to say it during Shacharit or during Mincha, then you are stuffed, because it means you have to go back and pray it again. Which is probably good news for most of you, which is why, right, most of you probably didn't pray it all this morning, just out of the whole thing, from the beginning.
Okay, so I guess I have to do that again.
I guess.
What, three times?
Huh?
3 times, Shachrit?
No, here, so the thing is like this. If you forget in the evening service, then you don't have to go back. Right? The reason for that is because even though we do recite Ya'aleh V'Yavo at night time on Rosh Chodesh, the important dimension of the worship that took place in the temple was during the day. So if you forget at night, you don't have to repeat. However, if you forget to recite Ya'aleh V'Yavo at Shacharit or at Mincha, then you've got to go back and you've got to recite the Amidah again, because it means that you didn't say what you were supposed to say. Right? So many of you are probably working the premise. If you don't say anything at all, then that way you're covering your bases. Good idea. Yeah.
This morning, if I did Shachrit and I missed the Ya'aleh, I have to go back and read the Amidah.
You have to recite the Amidah again. The other alternative.
When do I do it?
No, now after class, right? Now. I mean, look. The other alternative is, of course, to give me $500. That could get you off the hook as well. I will then wave my hands above your head and mumble something unintelligible, like I do during class, and then that way, we can get around the problem. Okay, no reaction. So I guess you're going to have to recite the Amidah again, right? If you forgot Ya'aleh V'Yavo, you should recite the Amidah again.
Is it any different if it's on Shabbat and it's Rosh Chodesh?
No, none at all. It is true that Rosh Chodesh, of course, can fall out on Shabbat. Rosh Chodesh will always be, the next Rosh Chodesh will always be the day after the Rosh Chodesh of this month. So now, for example, this month Rosh Chodesh was Wednesday and Thursday, so next Rosh Chodesh will be on Friday. No, on Friday. Day after, right? Now, again,
it'll start Thursday night.
It'll start on Thursday night, but of course it started on Tuesday night. But what you gain at one end, you lose at the other, right? So it's always going to be the next day along, right? So you're right, the day begins at night time, so it's going to be on Thursday night. That's going to be the beginning of Rosh Chodesh. Why is Rosh Chodesh sometimes 2 days and sometimes 1 day? So today, for example, we've got Rosh Chodesh Tammuz is going to be 2 days. Rosh Chodesh Av is only going to be 1 day, right? Next month. Why is that? Because the lunar months are 29 and a half days long. Right? The truth is that the lunar months have been measured by the sages from over thousands of years ago to be exactly 29 days, 12 hours, and 798 1,080ths. Right? Instead of breaking hours down into minutes as we do, they had them broken down into 1,080 units. And they knew that each lunar month was exactly 29 days, 12 hours, and 798 units, which is unbelievably accurate, which of course raises the rather simple question: if Jews are capable of working out that the month is exactly 29 days and 12 hours and 798 units, how come they're so appalling at keeping time? But that's not for this particular class over here. That's just a general observation. Yeah.
So if you, let's say, yesterday I prayed mincha, right, and I didn't put in this thing, so are all my prayers invalidated, or there's still some?
No, it's not. I tell you, the thing is like this. It's not that your prayers are invalid. If a person, look, what's the pshat? Pshat is like this. A person's supposed to be aware of what's going on, right? So you're supposed to be aware that it's Rosh Chodesh, and that means that when you're praying, you're supposed to be aware of the fact that you've got to say Ya'aleh v'yavo. If a person didn't say it for reasons that were not exactly, again, some people just don't say it because they're just not careful enough, right? So some people, the idea of praying, it's all so overwhelming to begin with that the idea of adding something else in is like, I can't deal with this right now. I'm just gonna pray what I know. It really depends on why the person skipped out what he skipped out. Right, but are your prayers invalid? It's not that your prayers are invalid. Kodesh Baruch Hu is always happy to hear your prayers. It's just that, of course, it's correct to put in what needs to be put in. Did I wriggle out of that one okay? More or less, okay. Hold on a second. I just want to come back to Rosh Chodesh to the days, because just so we should finish. Okay, we just finished up the idea, which means that a lunar month is 29 and a half days long. Now, that's a little bit complicated because we can't have Rosh Chodesh begin in the middle of a day, right? So what do? Normally the months they balance each other out. So one month is going to have 2 days of Rosh Chodesh, we'll have 30 days, and the next month will only have 29 days. And that way they even each other out, because the 29 and a half days are going to be distributed between the 2 months. So 1 month will be 29 days, 1 month will be 30 days. When you've got a month that's 30 days long, you're going to have 2 days of Rosh Chodesh. The first day will be on the 30th day of the month, and the second day will be on the first day of the month, which is exactly what happened over yesterday and today. Yesterday was Rosh Chodesh, but the Rosh Chodesh of yesterday was on Lamed Sivan, the 30th day of Sivan, and today is Aleph Tammuz. In order to balance out the extra day of the month, we've added in over here, next month, right, Tammuz is only going to be 29 days long, and there'll only be 1 day of Rosh Chodesh because the next day will be Aleph Av, right? So that's why some months are going to have two days worth of Rosh Chodesh, and some months are going to have only 1 day worth of Rosh Chodesh. It's normally completely consistent, except for 2 months. The months of Kislev and Cheshvan and Kislev are months that sometimes have 2 days and sometimes have 1 day, to do with the peculiarities of the lunar system and how many days need to be inside of each month, inside of each year. I'm sorry, yeah.
Well, so would the math work out as 6 months would be 2 days of Rosh Chodesh, and the other 6 would be 1 day of Rosh Chodesh?
It's normally one on and one off.
Right.
So normally what happens is you have 6 months worth of what's called a full month, which is going to have 30 days inside of it, and 6 days month of what's called a lacking. In Hebrew it's called chaser and maleh. Maleh means full and chaser means lacking. So that's what we've got. We've got our 2 days worth of Rosh Chodesh now. Now we're in the second day, so it's the Aleph. Now is Aleph Tammuz, the first day of Tammuz. Which means like this: if you forget to say Ya'aleh v'yavo during the day, then you should go back and recite the Amidah again. If you forget to say Ya'aleh v'yavo at night, you don't have to go back and you don't have to recite the Amidah again. After the repetition of the Amidah, or if you're praying by yourself, so there's no repetition, you then, on Rosh Chodesh, you recite something called Hallel. Now, Hallel is a special series of prayers that have been put together in order to commemorate special days. Hallel is recited always on Yom Tov, right, on festival days, and it's recited on Rosh Chodesh as well. Now, on a regular Yom Tov day, we recite what's called full Hallel, and on Rosh Chodesh, we recite something called half Hallel. Now, half Hallel is a misnomer because it really only skips out 2 paragraphs of the Hallel. It's not really half Hallel at all. In Hebrew, it's called Hallel b'dilugim, which means Hallel that you skip out bits and pieces. It's not really called Chatzi Hallel at all. So just so you should know, if you take a look inside of it, where is Hallel over here? If you take a look inside of the Siddur, you'll see. So if you take a look on 632, you say everything here. On page 634, so it says Rabbi scroll tells you over here that you skip out the paragraph that begins with Loilanu, and on the next page you skip out the paragraph which begins with Ahavti ki yishma Hashem, and all the rest of everything is recited.
זה רק בראש חודש.
On Rosh Chodesh, and just to confuse things a little bit, on Chol HaMoed Pesach as well. We also do that. The reason for that is, it's going to get a little bit complicated, I apologize. The reason for that is that on Chol HaMoed Pesach, the korbanot, the sacrifices that were brought, were the same every single day. There was no difference between them. Therefore, the half Hallel is recited and not the whole Hallel. Whenever you've got a situation where different sacrifices are brought every day, then you recite the whole thing. So, for example, on Chol HaMoed Sukkot, the intermediate days of Sukkot, the whole of Hallel is recited because every day they brought a different kind of a sacrifice. Okay, so it's all tying back into what was taking place in the temple.
So when you say different kind, it would be different type of animal, for example?
No, it's the same animals, different amounts. Mm-hmm. Right, so on Chol HaMoed Sukkot, the amount that was brought was one less every day. Mm-hmm. Right, again, there was a whole reason for that as well, which I don't want to go into right now.
Why we say not have the Hallel, but short on Pesach, is it not because we have some kind of the Bnei Shloim, even though the Egyptians were our enemies?
Yeah. It says another reason that's brought out. I mean, the technical reason is because of the sacrifices. On Pesach, another reason is brought down in the Gemara. It says that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, on the 7th day of Pesach, which is the last day of Yom Tov, we should really be reciting a full Hallel because it's a festival day again. But we don't recite it because the Egyptians drowned in the sea, and therefore we're dampening down a little bit our enthusiasm because these people died. They died. It was they died because of what they did, and they died because of as a payment for their actions. But nevertheless, we're sorry that that's what happened. Therefore, we don't recite a whole Hallel.
During the benching, if you skip the Alev Yavod, you have to go back and redo all of benching?
If you flip to page 189, exactly. Over there, it's got a little box over there. It's such a parasite. You can't even flip to your own page. Everything's got to be done for you. Incredible. Here, if you take a look on page 189, so there's a whole box over there that tells that if you forgot to say Ritzei, which is said on Shabbat, or Yalev Yavo, right, which is said on Rosh Chodesh and on Yom Tov, what are you supposed to do, right? So it really depends on where you've reached inside of benching as to whether you have to go back or you don't have to go back, whether you can slip it in somewhere else. Okay, and I'm not going to read this all through, not because my reading skills are still somewhat remedial, but simply because I would imagine you could probably do that yourself, except for certain people who obviously can't even turn their own pages, so how are they going to read their own footnotes? I don't know. כלום. מה אמרתי משהו? חלילה.
Hallel.
Okay. Hallel. So Hallel is recited. After Hallel, they bring out the Sefer Torah, and we read from the Sefer Torah, special Torah reading for Rosh Chodesh. Now, today, of course, is Thursday. So today is a regular day that we're supposed to read from the Sefer Torah anyway. However, the Torah reading that's read is a Rosh Chodesh reading, and not the reading that would be read normally, right? So normally we would read from Parshas Korach, the first part of Parshas Korach, but we're not doing that today. We are reading from Rosh Chodesh instead. If anybody here was paying attention, which you probably weren't, because you really need to keep your eye on the ball. But something very fascinating happens on Rosh Chodesh. The problem on Rosh Chodesh, you call up 4 people get an aliyah, right? So a Kohen, a Levi, and then 2 Yisraelim get aliyot on Rosh Chodesh. The problem is, now it's going to get a little bit subtle, a little bit complex over here. And I apologize, but it requires a little bit of math. But in order to call up 4 people, you need to have 12 verses, right? Because each one's a minimum of 3 verses, and 3 times 4 is 12. Which, interestingly enough, if you do it the other way around, is exactly the same thing. 4 times 3 is also 12, apparently. So I've been told. Anyway, I don't know. Where's Ben when you need him? Where's our resident math expert? But there are only 11 verses in the Torah portion that's being read that describe the sacrifices that were brought for Rosh Chodesh. Right? So it's a little bit of a problem. So what happens? When the person called up for Levi, the last verse that was read for Cohen is read again in Levi. And that way you get your 12th verse put in that way. Everybody gets called up for 3 verses. It's rather a fascinating thing because under normal circumstances, what did I tell you? If anyone remembers when we talked about reading the Torah on Mondays and Thursdays regularly, if you don't have 9 verses in the first section of whatever needs to be read, so you just keep going, right? And you add in some more verses until you've got a minimum of 9 verses, so each person could be called up for 3. What's the problem over here by Rosh Chodesh is that the minute you leave those 11 verses, you're going to be moving into something which is not Rosh Chodesh related anymore. So it becomes a problem because what you're supposed to be reading on Rosh Chodesh is a Kriyas Torah, the Torah reading for Rosh Chodesh and not for anything else. When it's a regular Monday and Thursday, so you can read as many verses as you want because that's the Torah portion for that week. Right? Rabbi say, a reaction. I demand a reaction.
Yes.
Correct.
Thank you. Okay, that doesn't count. I mean, I appreciate the effort that went into it. I really do. But
We only recite Rosh Chodesh. What if Rosh Chodesh comes on Wednesday and we don't have reading of the Torah?
no. So then you have a special Torah reading, right? Whatever is a
we pull
regular.
out the Torah,
Yeah. So whatever is the regular order for Rosh Chodesh includes reading from the Torah, right? So yesterday, for example, was Wednesday. There's no regular reading of the Torah during the week on a Wednesday, but when Rosh Chodesh falls out on a Wednesday, you read from the Torah. When a Yom Tov falls out on a day that the Torah is not read, the Torah is read anyway, right? So intermediate days of Pesach, every single day, you're going to read from the Torah.
And what is it, Parasha or Haftarah? Rosh
It's
Chodesh.
Parashah.
Parasha,
It's
Rosh
taken
Chodesh.
out from the Sefer Torah is taken out, and you read. Here, you can have a
Which
look and
parasha?
see. You read on Rosh Chodesh. You read. It's coming from Bamidbar, Sefer Bamidbar, which is Numbers, from chapter 28. Okay, so that's what's going on. It's going to be read from the Torah, right? After the Sefer Torah is put back, then Ashrei is recited, or again, if you're davening Nusach Sfaradit, so Ashrei is recited, and then Uval Etzion is recited, and then you put the Sefer Torah back. And after that, you then daven Musaf. What is Musaf? Musaf is an additional Amidah which is added into the service, right? And it's added in whenever there was an additional sacrifice that was offered on that day, right? So we have an additional Amidah which is added in. So the ones that you're probably familiar with is every Shabbat, right? Every Shabbat there is a Musaf Amidah which is recited after the Sefer Torah has been put back and the Haftarah has been read. And that Musaf corresponds to the Musaf, to the additional sacrifice which was offered on Shabbat, right? And that's why the Musaf Amidah always relates to whatever sacrifices were being offered. So if you paid attention this morning to what it was that you were saying, you'll see that the Musaf is all relating to the sacrifices that were offered up because it was Rosh Chodesh. If, for example, you've got Shabbat and Rosh Chodesh coinciding with each other, which is what will happen in Mitzvah Hashem in 2 months' time, when we get to Elul, so then they'll bring out 2 Sifrei Torah, 2 Sefer Torahs will get taken out. From the first Sefer Torah, they'll read the verses that are to do with the regular Torah portion that needs to be read. And the second Sefer Torah, they'll read the special Rosh Chodesh Torah reading. Right? After Musaf, then there's a repetition, there's Kedusha, like with all the other repetitions. And after that, again, depending on which kind of a community you belong to, either what will happen is you will say Aleinu, and then instead of saying the Shir Shel Yom, instead of saying the Psalm of the day, what will be recited will be a special Psalm for Rosh Chodesh, which is called Baruch Hinashi, which again you'll find over here at the end of Shacharit in the Siddur. You'll find it after the Psalms of the day. Here it's on page 172. Right? It's a psalm, also a psalm from the book of Psalms. It's Psalm number 104. And it's recited, it's pretty long, right? And it's recited every Rosh Chodesh, interestingly enough, even if Rosh Chodesh falls out on Shabbat. Right? Normally the Psalm of the day, when you've got a special something going on, so the Psalm of the day is replaced by a psalm that relates to the particular festive day, unless it happens to be Shabbat. If it's Shabbat, then the Psalm of the day for Shabbat is always recited, unless it is Rosh Chodesh. On Rosh Chodesh, we always recite Baruch Hinafshi. The Gemara explains, I think it's Gemara in Sukkah, if I remember correctly, the Gemara in Sukkah explains the reason for that was to publicize the fact that it was Rosh Chodesh, because in the olden days, in the temple days, it took a while until the word got out that it was Rosh Chodesh. So even on Shabbat, they would recite the psalm for Rosh Chodesh to let everybody know about it. Yeah?
So, does this have to be sung in the morning, or can you sing in the evening? Because it says morning service right here on the top of the page.
Yeah. So the emphasis is like this: it's best to say it inside of the service in the morning. It can be said the entire day, right? But not once the sun has set. So you shouldn't be saying it anymore, because then you've moved into the next day, right? But any time within the day, if you haven't said it yet, you could say it. Not now, obviously, because it's class. Wouldn't do a thing like that, would you?
So you said that there was something to do with the sacrifice on Shabbat. You can sacrifice stuff on Shabbat?
Yeah, interestingly enough, it's fascinating, right? That under normal circumstances, all kinds of things that we're not allowed to do on Shabbat. One of the things you're not allowed to do on Shabbat is you're not allowed to slaughter animals in order to cook them on Shabbat, right? However, in the temple, those laws were overruled. Thank you, right? Those rules were overruled. And in the temple, all kinds of things were happening which are normally forbidden on Shabbat. So, for example, in the temple, there was slaughtering taking place. There was skinning taking place. There was animals being offered up. It's forbidden to cook on Shabbat as well, right? But there are animals being offered up on the altar on Shabbat. And the Leviim, anybody here a Levi? We go through this every day, right? It's ridiculous. The Leviim would play their musical instruments on Shabbat, which is also forbidden.
What's the reason?
Huh? The reason is because the temple is considered to be like a place which in a certain sense is what's called a malam min hatavar. It's above nature, which means that the overwhelming need to offer up the sacrifices and to have the temple service run the way that it needs to, that was something which was more important than the laws of Shabbat. Right? So I don't know how you do that, but it's definitely eyebrow raising, that's for sure, right?
They did the offerings on Shabbat.
They did offerings on Shabbat, yeah.
But before that, if they did that, they would get skila.
Yeah, for sure, which means like this, even when the temple is extended, Mitzvah Hashem, when the temple will be rebuilt very, very soon, right? And we'll be able to wander down there and to, and to partake in the services that are taking place over there. But outside of the temple, all of these things are still forbidden, which means it's not that once the temple is extant, then sacrifices can be offered up and you can now go and, you can go and shecht a lamb and have, fresh lamb on Shabbat morning because you slaughtered it and you cooked it on Shabbat. That's completely forbidden outside of the temple. Right? The only place that it was allowed was in the temple, and interestingly enough, the only sacrifices that were allowed on Shabbat were communal sacrifices, which is no individuals could bring sacrifices on Shabbat. Only sacrifices that were being offered up for the good of the community. And those are the sacrifices which appear inside of what we recite over there, so you'll see exactly what they were.
You would think that if you're even closer to the Holy of Holies, that you would try to maintain
for sure.
more holy of a stance and not shecht.
Yeah, I agree. It's in a certain way, it certainly is counterintuitive, right? You would imagine that if anything, once you're in the temple, you need to be, even more careful, right?
But what gives them the idea that they can do that? What gives them the idea that they can do that? It doesn't
God commanded in the Torah, in Sefer Vayikra, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says. And again, here, the very fact that God has to command you to do it is obviously an indication that what you're saying is correct. Right? And if I were to ask you, we would all say the same thing. No, in the temple, however careful you are outside, right, in the temple you've got to be even more careful, right? 1,000 times more careful. And yet the HaKadosh Baruch Hu say no, that the temple services have to carry on continuously.
But it's weird because then why then stop it altogether with the destruction? If it needs to continue continuously.
It's a technical issue. It really is, right? Because in order to be able to offer up sacrifices, you have to have the temple, right? If there's no temple, then
So prayers replace sacrifice.
Prayers replace sacrifice, right? But nevertheless, it's not. It's not sacrificing.
No, it's like a more of a spiritual sacrifice. Every time you pray is a sacrifice of yourself.
Yeah.
You're changing. That's the way it works. So it is a sacrifice, but more on a spiritual level.
It's a more certainly. It's for sure. It's certainly a more spiritual dimension. It's certainly not a physical sacrifice is something.
They didn't need to pray 3 times a day because they would sacrifice.
Right.
But today we need to pray 3 times a day because
really?
we can't sacrifice.
Yeah,
that's why we do it.
right.
What is it?
It's in the Pirkei Avot. They didn't pray 3 times a day. They sacrificed.
3 times a day.
No, yeah, I think so, right?
Yeah,
Rabbi?
yeah,
3
yeah.
times a day they sacrifice.
Very
That's
good.
all.
Yeah.
So Jews had to sacrifice like a dove every 3 times, 3 doves
Not
a day.
again. It's not each person,
It's for the community.
which means that in the temple, what was taking place was there were communal services where the community's sacrifices were being offered up by the people that were there.
It wasn't individual.
But it was for the whole of Eretz Israel.
Yeah, for all the Jews everywhere.
Uh-huh.
Which means like this: it's not 100% accurate. What you said, it's not bad. 99.99, not bad. What was it? Everybody had to pray, right? You had to connect to God.
Uh-huh.
In the olden days, connecting to God. What's the olden days? In the first temple period, connecting to God meant that you would just you would just feel a need to communicate with God. You would go stand in a corner somewhere, like I used to do in school, and. Well, I didn't daven. I just stood in the corner because that's what the teacher told me to do. But you would stand in the corner and you would just like communicate with God. The problem was, as the first temple period came to an end, so our spiritual levels dropped drastically, and people were really not very. They weren't motivated to do that. So along came the men of the Great Assembly. They said, "Okay, listen, this is the way we're going to do it. You got to do it anyway. So we're gonna come up with a text." And all you've got to do is just work on saying it properly. Which on the one hand is easier, makes it easier for us. On the other hand, it also makes it a little bit more difficult because sometimes it's difficult to connect to the text. So, we have to work hard on understanding what it is that we're saying it and why we're saying it. There is, just as as an aside, if we're already tangenting around over here, that on Rosh Chodesh, there is a custom on Rosh Chodesh to eat a festive meal. Right now, this should come as no surprise to anybody. We're Jewish. Everything seems to revolve around food somehow or other. Somebody once described the Jewish year as being somebody tried to kill us, we won, let's eat. Which pretty much. Huh?
Or if it's Yom Kippur, don't eat.
Whatever, but it's all around food, which means either you do or you don't. But you've got to know that that's what you're doing. So there is a custom to eat a festive meal on Rosh Chodesh. Some people are careful to eat a meaty meal on Rosh Chodesh because again, meat is like sort of got a double dimension. It's got a dimension of something which is similar to what happened inside of the temple. And meat normally, meat is normally something which is a more enjoyable meal. Maybe not over here when it's not 100% sure whether it's meat, and if it is, what meat it is. I once heard a nice idea, when they walk up and down the aisles in the aeroplane, and they tell you, chicken or beef, they're not asking you what you want, they're asking what it is. They don't know either, right? Anyway, so if you get the opportunity, you should eat a festive meal. Over here, I don't know what, the festive meal, I don't know exactly what they're going to serve up today in order to fulfill that little dictate, but just remember to be happy whilst you eat it. Or at least be happy whilst you watch the person next to you eating it. Yeah.
Rabbi, you said it's all communal
sacrifices, yeah.
Shabbos. What about a single person? He has to, can he do on Shabbos?
Can he do what?
Any kind of karbonos. That belongs to a single.
No, which means that on Shabbat, the only sacrifices that were being offered up were communal ones, and if anybody had to bring a personal offering, they would have to wait until Sunday.
And there was no way to do a sacrifice once sundown came. You have to do it during.
You don't.
Yeah, there are no sacrifices at night.
Is Shavuot also considered? We do Halal.
Oh yes, yeah, for sure. Shavuot
Maybe
is one of
they-
the 3 foot festivals, which means you've got Pesach, Shavuot, and Sukkot were the 3 festivals that that the Jews were commanded to come to Jerusalem, to come to the temple, and it's a very much a very festive day.
Full or
And
half? But
the whole thing, whole Hallow. Yes, no, okay. So that's what was taking place here with Rosh Chodesh. Now here in Israel, there is a custom at the end of davening. The last thing they recite in Nusach Ashkenaz is Ein Kelokenu, right? Which is normally recited. You won't find it in the Siddur over here because these Siddurim were printed for outside of Israel. Outside of Israel, it's normally only recited on Shabbat morning. Right, but in Nusach Ashkenaz over here in Eretz Yisrael they recite it as well, which is why if you get using the Siddur over here and they start saying Ein Kelokenu, you don't know what they're saying. So now you know what they're doing.
Would you find it in Nusach Sfard?
Huh?
Would you find
You'd
it?
probably find it in a Siddur for Nusach Sfard. You'll find it here. Can I have a look? You'll also find it at the end of the Shabbat davening. You'll find it. Yeah, here. Look, you see on Nusach Sfard, which is a Hasidic Nusach, the Hasidic text. So it does appear over here, right at the end of davening. there's a just if we're already tangenting, right? So a little bit more isn't going to hurt. I mean, maybe it will, but we already hurt. So
Okay.
a little bit more hurt at this point. This is like the Ein Kelokenu is a quintessential Jewish prayer. It is exquisitely ironic, right? Now, obviously, I don't really have to explain myself because everybody, if you've recited it in synagogue on Shabbat morning, so you know exactly to what I'm referring to, and you obviously say it every day because you're davening Nusach Sfard, so I don't have to explain what I just said. It doesn't have to be explained, right?
No, it's
Please do explain it though, for the plebeians.
Oh, here. So David, of course, understands exactly what I'm referring to, but he feels that in case there's anybody here in this room who maybe is not 100% aware, so I should just say it anyway, right, for them. So again, so for all of you who understand all of this, I apologize, I really do. But for those, if there is anyone here that doesn't understand, what do we do? Listen to what you say. It's a stranger's prayer. You say, Ein Kelokenu, there's no one like God. Ein Kadonenu, there's no one like our master. Ein Kamalkenu, there's no one like our king. Ein Kamoshienu, and there's no one like our savior. So far that's okay, right? Everyone's okay with that?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're happy. Next verse. Mi Kelokenu, who's like our God? Mi Ka'adonenu, who's like our master? I mean, are we a bunch of morons or what? We say Ein Kelokenu, there's no one like God. Who's like God? You're the problem. It should be the other way around, right? Ask the question and then answer it. You should say, Mi Kelokenu, Mi Kadonenu. We say, En Kelokenu, En Kadonenu. There's no one like God. Yet what do? We say, there's no one like God, and then we say, who's like God?
Rhetorical question at this point.
So the simple explanation over here is that it's a rhetorical question, right? You're saying, En Kelokenu, statement of fact, right? And then a rhetorical question, Mi Kelokenu, Mi Kadonenu. Rav Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld, one of the great rabbis from a few generations ago, he lived originally in Brisk, and then he came to Jerusalem. He was the head of the Orthodox community, what was called the Old Yishuv in here in Israel about 100 years ago. He says like this, the most fantastic idea. He says, stop and think about it. Mi Kelokenu, who is like God? He says, really, there's no bigger heretical question than that. You really hit the jackpot, right? With heresy, that's about as good as it gets. What do you mean, Mi Kelokenu, who's like God? So he says that every single question can be asked and should be asked, so long as it is prefaced by Ein Kelokenu. You hear? It's the most beautiful idea, which means so long as you know Ein Kelokenu, you know that there's no one like God. Ein Kadonenu, there's no one like our master. God is God, right? So long as you begin with that, so long as that's your foundation, after that you can ask whatever you want. Even the most heretical question could be asked, like Mi Kelokenu. It's a very beautiful idea, it really is. You know, Judaism is different, very different to most other religions in the world, because most other religions in the world, they try to stay away from questions, certainly theological questions, because they don't want to get involved in a debate amongst themselves about what they do believe in and how they believe in it. Whereas Judaism, the whole of Judaism is built upon questions. Right? The very first, Torah Shebaal Peh, which is the oral Torah, the very first thing in the Torah Shebaal Peh, in the oral Torah, is a question. The Mishnah in Brachot, when you start reciting Kriya Shema. And then it goes through a whole different bunch of possibilities. This one says like this one says like that, this one says like the other. And then you've got the Gemara, which is going to start, it's going to start discussing how can that be, and where's it go? How do we rule, and what are we supposed to do? But Judaism is something which is absolutely based upon the concept of questions. And the more questions, the better it is, because the more questions you've got, the more answers you're going to get. The more answers there are, the stronger something becomes, the clearer it becomes in your own mind, the clearer it is.
You look at the word like chokhmah, which is wisdom, like koach, ma, which is strength. And
interesting, yeah? Chokhmah, no. Yeah, you heard that? Yeah. Or you just made it up? No, if you had made it up, that would have been really neat, right? But it's just neat. Here, chokhmah, it's nice, right? Chokhmah, the word chokhmah means wisdom, and it's a composite of two words, of koach, which means strength, and ma, which means what? Our strength is going to come through our questions. It really is.
Hallel is praise.
Hallel is praise, right? I'll tell you something more than that. One of the very early authorities, the Rashba, he says like this: the word ma, which means what, is 45 in numerical values, right? You know, each letter's got a numerical value, right? So mem is 40 and hey is 5. And he says that the word Adam is also 45. Adam means a person. Aleph is 1, Dalet is 4, and mem is 40, so it's also 45. And he says, why are they the same numerical value? Because a person is known, yet you can know a person through the questions they ask.
Wow.
Which means over here it's not really possible to know you people, but right? It's an interesting idea. Stop and think about it for a minute. The truth is that questions are very revealing. They really are. They reveal what a person's thinking. They also reveal what a person's aspirations are, right? A person's asking about one thing, and you can see, right, where the questions are taking that person. What's important for that person.
Mm-hmm.
Right? The difference between what bracha do you recite over something green and unidentifiable, as opposed to this is lunch. They're both saying the same thing, right? It's the same question, but one of them's saying, okay, we're going to try to turn this into a spiritual experience, and the other one is saying, this is lunch.
Did you give me food? Funny.
Good, okay. I mean, no reaction is no reaction. Okay. Anyway, that's the beauty of Ein Kelokenu. Of course, in Chutz La'aretz, outside of the land of Israel, Ein Kelokenu is it's a very, very popular prayer, because it means that the services are coming to an end. And soon there's going to be Kiddush, and everything's going to be a lot better than it was, right? But that's that over here in Israel. We recite it every single day. I'm not quite sure why that is, actually. Presumably because it deals with the korbanos, it deals with the sacrifices, right? The pitum haktoret. So maybe the reason over there is because we're in Israel, and Israel is the place where the ketoret was offered up. So I guess that makes sense. Anyway, if we're already tangenting, the pitum haktoret. What is the ketoret? The ketoret is the incense, right? Right, yeah, for sure. It had the most incredible smell.
Is the same definition of like the colloquials? Like I see incense.
Say again, the same definition
It's
is?
like vernacular used to be using like now, like today, like incense I see as like
Ketoret.
Potpourri kind of like.
Yeah.
So you're talking about the same kind of thing, or is it like much different?
What was the purpose of it?
Well, I mean,
where
physically it was different.
Right.
Its function was the same though.
Like how do they make their incense?
Oh, here. So this one over here. Let's have a look and see, right? What?
I was gonna say that the incense is used for this for God to smell it. Or
Yeah,
something.
reach
It's saying
nichoach
our
laHashem.
prayers.
We're giving God human characteristics so that we can relate to what's going on. The essence, the smell, is us doing what God wants us to do, right? That generates this concept of a reach nichoach laHashem, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants us to do His will down here in this world. That's going to generate that smell, right? It's a smell. Does God smell? God doesn't smell, right? But God put us here into this world in order for us to do what needs to be done. And by doing that, we are generating that spiritual dimension. The function of the Ketoret was, first of all, to bring a smell into the temple, that the temple should have this incredible smell. There are 11 different spices that were ground up together and mixed together, and then they were put on. They were set on fire, right? 11 different spices. One of which was something chelbana, was something which smelled really, really, really bad. Chelbana, the third one along. Oh no, if nobody's got it open over here, so it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Don't. You don't have to. You're not going to find it in that one. Right, chelbana is something called galbanum. Did I say that right? I've got no idea how you pronounce it in English. Galbanum. Over here it's spelled as galbanum. I don't know.
Oh, it's not a chemical, I guess.
No, it's a spice.
Okay.
Right? So there are a whole series of spices over here, some of which you'll be familiar with, right? Stacked, I don't know if you know what that is. I don't even know if I'm pronouncing these words correctly. Onica, galbanum, frankincense. Right, you'll know that from the story of the three kings and right, to the 25th of December. Myrrh, cassia, spikenard, saffron, all of these are beautiful smelling spices, except for chelbana, which was galbanum. So the Arizal, again, we're talking about something very Kabbalistic now, it's a very, very beautiful idea. The Arizal says that the Ketoret, which is this incense, not one particular spice, but these 11 spices all mixed together, so each one is unidentifiable. The spice, the Ketoret, is a symbol of the Jewish nation. Right, and inside of the Jewish nation is comprised of all kinds of people, going from the very righteous to the very wicked. We're all part of the Jewish nation. And that's why he says the chelbana, this galbanum, which is contained inside of the Ketoret, was a very nasty smelling spice, but when it was mixed together with all the other spices which represent the goodness inside of the Jewish people, you can't identify it anymore. The whole thing comes together and makes the most incredible smell to God, which means that we, the Jewish nation, well, our job is not to look down at people that are not doing what they're supposed to do, but rather to include them inside of the Jewish nation, so that we should have, once again, the ability to draw everyone together. The minute everyone is drawn together and no one is particularly identifiable, then at that point we will bring a reich nichoach laHashem. We'll bring that incredible fragrance to God and an incredible sense of satisfaction.
The temple must have stopped with the sacrifices, though.
Yeah, interestingly enough, the Gemara says that one of the ongoing miracles that took place in the temple was that it didn't have a bad smell. Mm-hmm. Right? We spoke about the other day. We spoke about it, right? There were no flies in the temple, and they offered up birds with their feathers on, which was the most horrible smell. And yet inside of the temple, it didn't have that horrible smell to it. That was one of the miracles, just to show us that the temple was a different place altogether.
There was also one of the miracles that the fire, no matter how
the
much
fire
wind,
of the Ketoret, right, of this, the smoke went up in a straight pillar up into the Shamayim, right? Didn't make any difference, right? And the rain didn't extinguish the fire, right? Everything went up in a straight, all kinds of things over here that were
open miracles.
Yeah. It says that only in the first temple, right? The second temple wasn't like that, but it says in the first temple period that people, non-Jews, would come to Jerusalem just to be inspired by what they saw. They weren't coming to convert. They to be exposed to these miracles that were taking place.
Temple did smell bad?
Huh?
So during the second temple, did it smell bad?
It's an interesting question. I don't know, because the Gemara doesn't clarify. The Gemara, of course, most of the Gemara was written already towards the end of the second temple period. So I don't know. I don't think so. I think maybe there wasn't a smell.
I mean, isn't it said that you cannot pray in a place where it smells bad? Where it's
Yeah, the question is, what's a bad smell, though? Which means that the smell of burning feathers is not enough to stop somebody from smelling. What would be a bad smell, for example, would be, wastage, right? That would be a problem.
That's why the bathrooms were outside.
That's why the bathrooms were outside, and that's why today the bathrooms are inside, but they're very different from the bathrooms that used to be.
Walls, they're closed, right?
They have walls, and also the sort of idea of flushing bathrooms, that everything's cleaned out almost immediately, or supposed to be, unless you're living in a dormitory.
The bathroom's next to your bed.
Whatever. we're gonna stop over here, Mitzvah Hashem. It's Thursday, right? So tomorrow, of course, is the best day of the week because I don't have to come in, and everyone should have a wonderful, wonderful Shabbat, Mitzvah Hashem, and we'll meet up here again on Sunday morning, as always, bleary-eyed, hungover, wishing to be anywhere else but here, right?
Thank you, Rabbi.
Good. Oh no, really, but if you're already.